Hi there, my name's Susanna. I work in the communications team at the GPhC, and I have been coordinating the questions that people have been submitting as you signed up for the webinar, and also colleagues of mine have been busy on the Q&A box as we've gone through the webinar. So we've got lots of questions from you. Thank you for submitting those. We have a panel for you to answer them. We have obviously Mark, who you heard from previously. We've got Lisa is going to stay on to talk about stuff to do with the actual assessment. We have Gemma Wyatt, who is our operations manager. And we've also got Sarah Purdy, who is one of our foundation training coordinators, facilitators. So a huge wealth of experience of dealing with assessments and questions about assessments. So what I'll do is I've got some questions coming through here. I'm going to ask, we've had lots of different questions, and obviously people are asking sort of similar things. I'm going to group them together and ask individual members of the panel to respond to them. So if we start right at the beginning, I think, of what it's actually going to be like on the day. So Gemma, if I can come to you first, could you tell us about, we've had some questions about what the exam rooms will be like and what the test centres are like. Could you tell us a bit about how we've selected those and what people can expect on the day?
Yes, certainly. As Mark mentioned earlier, that all test centres are permanent test centres for this sitting, and we have and we will be carrying out checks beforehand by both BTL and GPhC members of staff to ensure that the assessment rooms are the most appropriate for you to be able to sit the assessment.
Great, thanks very much. That's really helpful. And Sarah, can I come to you next? There's been quite a few questions about how long between the first and second paper will people have in order to eat or to rest? And are they allowed to leave the test centre between the morning and the afternoon papers? Do they need to bring lunch? Can they have it on site? Do they have to go out? Do they have to stay in? What are the arrangements between the papers for people?
Sure, Susanna. So we will be, everybody should get at least an hour between the morning and the afternoon parts of the assessment. In most of the centres that they are able to stay in the building, but they are free to leave as well. And in terms of whether they should bring their own lunch or not, obviously that is part of the sort of, doing your research before you turn up at the centre and working out what is in the vicinity before you get there, because obviously it's really important to stay nourished and hydrated during the day so that you can perform at your absolute best.
No worries. Okay, so basically, and I would imagine, Gemma, people can have a look in Scheduler as well at their test centre and find out where it is and do some Googling and that kind of thing.
Yes, and we're going to be publishing some more details of the address details and further information of the test centres shortly on our November webpage with more details for each centre.
Brilliant. Okay, so plenty of time to make plans. Yeah. Well, I'll just ask you one more question, Gemma, about lots of questions about extra time and people being in the same room as candidates with standard amounts of time. So is it likely that people are going to be in the same room, or what should people do if they find themselves in the same place?
Some candidates will be in the same room as candidates with standard time, and so it's very important for candidates who do have the standard time to leave test room quietly and calmly in case others are still carrying on with the test. Some candidates will have granted sole occupancy rooms, so they will be in separate rooms, but most candidates with extra time will be in the same room as others, but invigilators will be seating candidates in certain areas to ensure that there's the least disruption for candidates throughout the assessment.
Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, just be aware of the people around you, I think. Okay, Lisa, I might come to you. There's lots of questions about obviously the assessment and the questions in the assessment. A big one has been, are the November exams harder than they said September, but I think they might have meant June actually. But are certain sittings harder than other ones, and how do you manage that?
No, They're not harder. We use various techniques to ensure that we have exactly the same standard for passing the assessment, regardless of which sitting you take. And that's obviously really, really important. Without that, it wouldn't be fair. So although each assessment will be a different collection of questions, we will move the pass mark appropriately so that the standard required to pass remains the same. So if we put together a collection of questions that was marginally more difficult than the questions in June, then you would expect the pass marks to be marginally lower. And we use various statistical techniques to do that equating across different sittings. And that works very well.
Excellent, thank you. And also people have been asking about how to best prepare for the sitting. Obviously, some of the information you've given us tonight has been very, very helpful, but things like past papers or practice papers, is there a reason why they're not around, or you know, we provide example questions rather than that?
Yeah, so we provide example questions really for the reasons that I've outlined. It's there really to give a flavour rather than to be a mock exam. And we review those every year with our Board of Assessors to make sure that they're still current and that they're still reflective of the things that we might be testing within the assessment. So we can keep that set of questions relevant and valid and therefore helpful to candidates. We don't make past papers available, because the methodology that we use to keep the standards the same means that we do reuse some questions from one sitting in another sitting, so we don't make the questions available. I mean, in terms of prep, I mean, everyone will have worked out their own best study techniques at this stage in their pharmacy career. One thing I would say is to really make the most of the opportunities for learning that you have in practice. The registration assessment isn't about testing theory, it's about testing stuff that you will encounter in practice. So just really maximise the use of the people around you in the pharmacies and have them asking you questions, and be very curious about prescriptions that you're seeing and about patients that you're interacting with, and think carefully, well, I've done a prescription for this patient for treatment for hypertension, but what if it was another patient from a different ethnic group? What if it was a patient with kidney dysfunction? Just be really curious and use the rest of the time available to you. Be really familiar with key text. So be familiar with the information that you'll find in the BNF, and be really familiar with how an SMPC is laid out and the types of information that you'll find there.
Great, thank you very much. And I've got one last question on to do with the questions of the assessment. It says, what's the difference between section 1 and 2 in the clinical paper? Are they just a separation between the different sorts of MCQs? Is there any significance of the sectioning?
There isn't, and in fact the sectioning is just a function of surpass. It's just the way we have to build the test in there. So for the pharmacy practice paper, because it's not just clinical, there's also questions there about pharmacy law and other non-therapeutic topics as well, such as clinical audit. So the sectioning really doesn't mean anything in terms of the content. Sections 1 and 2 are both made up of 45 single best answer questions, 1 from 5. And we haven't bunched questions on, for example, respiratory disease in section 1 and not put them in section 2. It's just a functionality of surpass. And then section 3 are the extended matching questions, 1 from 8. So hopefully that clarifies that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Sarah, I'm going to come back to you now. We've had some questions about calculators. So what do people need to bring calculator-wise on the day? And what do we check?
Okay, what we need people to do is to have a look at the permitted items list. So if they haven't already done so, they need to have a look at the guidance document for sitting the November assessment. There is on our website, there is a list of 4 different calculators. Some people that have perhaps sat in earlier sittings that used one of the calculators that's no longer on the list, we do still have those on the permitted item list. We just don't have them on the website because they have been discontinued. And we don't want people to have the frustration of trying to get a calculator that's no longer, in circulation. So if you check the permitted items list for the sitting, that will list all of the calculators that you are able to bring on the day. So I know I've had a few questions in the chat where people are a bit concerned that they've trying to get used to a new model. You know, just go and have a look, and you're probably fine with the one that you were using previously. But that is one of the things that will be checked by the invigilators on the day. It's one of the things that we ask them to look at for you.
Great, great. So if you're looking to buy a calculator of the assessment, the ones which are the ones that we got the pictures of in the sitting guidance are the ones to go for. But if you have one of the old ones that's no longer available, you're still able to use that, and they're in the permitted items list.
Just double check that permitted items list. The link is in there in the assessment day guidance, and you can click to the link through to the permitted items list, and you should see it listed on there.
Brilliant, thank you. And Gemma, I might just come to you now. We've had lots of questions about rough working and paper and pens, and how much paper and what sort of pens, and could you tell us a little bit about what's available in part 1 and part 2, please?
Yes, sure. So everyone will be provided with pen and paper by the test centres. If they want any more paper, they've used all the paper, they can raise their hand and an invigilator will pass them with more spare paper for them to do their workings. As Lisa mentioned, you will have to hand back all paper workings before you leave the exam room after part 1 and part 2. You can't take your workings with you, but anything else that you're unsure whether you are or aren't allowed to take, please refer to the permitted items list, like Sarah said, because it is all listed clearly on there what you are allowed to bring into the centre with you, and refer to the assessment day guidance for more information as well.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's most of the practical questions that we've covered. Mark, can I bring you in now? We had one question about, or a couple of questions about whether we're planning any extra sittings. Obviously, we did the March one in 2021. So yeah, are there any plans to do anything next year at all?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we're always looking at the question of the number of sittings. I think certainly we're obviously very aware that if, for example, somebody is unfortunately not fit to sit, for example, in November, or is unsuccessful, it's quite a long wait in between that and the next sitting. But as Lisa mentioned, it's a very resource-intensive process in terms of making sure that papers are produced to the right standard, whatever. So we're doing a lot of work around this at the moment in time. So I can't say in terms of any definitive point at this point in time in terms of any other assessments, but just something we're acutely aware of and continue to look into this.
Thank you. So yeah, nothing to report at the moment. Excellent. I think that's most of the main questions that we've had. If we have had a question from you and we haven't answered it, we will do our best to add these onto the website, onto the November sitting page. Obviously, we're recording this webinar. We will definitely put a link to that once the recording is completed and uploaded, and that will be on our YouTube channel. Anything that we've got here from the questions and stuff that will be helpful for everybody that isn't already there in the sitting guidance and the guidance we have at the moment, we'll add those to the website as well.